Hi, this is Michael Shevack. Welcome to Godsearch. This is podcast number 11. 11, one to one individual, incredibly unique. There isn't another single individual exactly like it. Remember, we talked about the fact that same doesn't really exist. It's a fiction in our minds. There's nothing that is absolutely 100% the same in every possible dimension. It doesn't exist. The entirety of all existence, to the best that we can witness it, has uniqueness and individuality and differences built into its design, which is an astonishing thing. Now, to be an individual, wow, what does that require? It requires something which is very sacred freedom. That's what we're going to discuss today. We've already discussed health, which is value priority number one. We've discussed peace, value priority number two, and we have a lot more to discuss about them at another time. Now we're going to discuss value priority three, which is freedom. As a reminder, we're going over what's called value priorities. These are the general guidelines that we have to follow if we want to cause and effect, sow and reap, and bring into our lives through our supernatural ability to have what's called free will, the experience of goodness, or the experience that's commonly called God. That's what we're here on Godsearch to do, is to learn how to bring into our lives the experience called God. Without freedom, that is not possible. Now, that's astonishing when you consider the history of religions, which have oftentimes repressed freedom. Well, they did so not merely because they were mean. That wasn't it. You're dealing with a period in time where there was recklessness and degeneracy and extreme danger to the survival of tribes and, in principle, the survival of large nations. But we're not in that era now, and we're in a very different era where we have built up human society so strong and so powerful that freedom has become an essential dynamic without which we can't survive. We know that freedom is necessary on all levels, and we know it exists on the deepest level of biology. Freedom is essential. Now, it's holy. It's holy. From a philosophical point of view, freedom, the word, could be said to be a synonym for the word God. Think about it. Freedom is something which is unbounded, unrestricted, unlimited, except by its own nature. Unlimited, unrestricted, unbounded, except by its own nature. That is a good definition of the divine being or the ultimate nature out of which any possible nature, the existence from which all existences comes, the being from which all different scales of beings come. Freedom is the essence and substance of the nature of God, because the creative nature of God, which is in each and every single creature and plant, but especially concentrated in the human being, is an incredible sacred capacity that is part of our spiritual design. It is freedom that allows us to venture forth and have a conscious experience called God, a conscious experience of the goodness and the unity and the incredibly complex and delicate synchronization of all our actions and thoughts and feelings into a unified whole that's a substantial truth. That's a substantial truth. It's truth written into the very being of existence. That's what freedom is. Freedom is that very, very special. Now, here's the tricky part. You know, a lot of people think that God means good, and you have to be really goody two shoes in order to have God and all that stuff. And that's a religious ideal, and it is very important. And to a certain extent, we are still using that ideal here by saying that God and good is how we're going to functionally approach the difficult matter of discussing these things. But the most amazing thing about freedom is it implies something that we don't want to face, and we hide from it. We truly, truly hide from it. The ability of the human being, you, me, to actually create evil, to be able to be only concerned with what I want, or you with what you want, and not care about anyone else, to simply survive for ourselves alone. That ability of radical individuality, it's individuality that's gone to such an incredible extreme because it exists. We have that freedom. We have that ability to express that extreme. We have to temper it because we're not alone, but we have it. The ability that we have to do something which is defiant of everyone around us, of governments, of religions, defiant of even our own conscience. How many people, especially when we're teenagers, have done something which we knew we shouldn't be doing, but we did it anyway because the defiance and the freedom and the recklessness and the chaos of the delicious experience of freedom for oneself alone was so intoxicating, we couldn't resist it. You cannot own your freedom on a God search unless you own your ability to be evil. Now, that may make no sense at all to religious people who are always trying to repress their evil. That's a good thing. Everyone needs toilet training, okay? But you have to repress and express at the same time. You don't repress in order to declare that the capacity to be individual, to express your spirit in a way that's uniquely yours, uniquely individual, uniquely you, is bad. Then there's a contradiction in the entire universe. In what way could there be a universe which permits that kind of radical individuality and it is bad? Why would it exist? Why would it exist? No. It exists because that individuality is sacred, astonishing, amazing, awesome, just awesome, and awe is the word for it. In Hebrew, the word for awe is the same word as fear. It's the same exact word. We're in awe of that power to commit evil. We are in fear of it at the same time because it's a power we don't know how to deal with. And we're here on Godsearch, which is life. You know, if you're alive, you're already on a God search. We're here to learn how to harness that ability of human evil, which is born of the gift of freedom, the gift of freedom. Now, many times we see, for instance, in religious teachings, the Garden of Eden story, where it seems like the expression of our freedom is considered a sin, a dangerous sin. We spoke about that. Sometimes it's called original sin. Well, what it is about is that our freedom can be used in a way that can hurt the material expression of creation. We can do things that are destructive to ourselves and the planet. It is the potential. Freedom is the potential for evil. The mistake of many religionists is they teach freedom itself as a sin. It's not. It's the greatest of gifts. The rest is learning how to use it. right? Oftentimes, the problem with the Bible is at the beginning of it in the Garden of Eden story, from which came many of the theologies that religions deal with, that was constructed off of a strange model where they took the ancient temple, where they were sacrificing animals to expiate sins, and it was kind of read backwards into nature, so that a lot of the rivers and stuff that are in Genesis create gemstones that were part of the ornamentation of the temple priests. A lot of the whole model of work and sin and how God functions is all based on kind of naturalizing the temple cult to show that it's part of the design of creation. A lot of the difficulties around this subject biblically is because the animal sacrifice and the temple cult were read back into creation, and creation was adjusted to kind of, explain and justify a certain phase in Hebrew development. So we are looking at it from the standpoint of sin and expiation. And unfortunately, uh, we oftentimes view freedom from the context of control. We say, all right, we have freedom. We're not paying attention to control. Freedom is opposed to control. Freedom is something that we violate control. We violate order. We violate all of these restrictions in order to express freedom. It is a very tricky definition. Very tricky definition, and it's what creates, unfortunately, when you're expressing freedom, oh well, an unfortunate tendency when you're dealing with freedom to have an obsessive compulsive disorder. You must be very careful on God searches to avoid obsessive compulsive disorders. You may have a feeling that you need to express something in freedom, which is a sacred right that you have. But then you say no. And the more you say no, the more you want it. And the more you want it, the more you say no. And the more you say no, the more you have to have it. The more there's a craving for it. The more you crave it, the more you repress it. The more you repress it, the sicker you get trying to express yourself. And to express yourself, you get sicker even still controlling yourself. And this war inside between control and decontrol will make you mad, meaning semi-psychotic and angry, because you will lose your mind. You're in a mind crack. It will also, if you don't express freedom correctly, well, it's obvious you won't have peace. That's value priority number two, but it's obvious you won't have health either, because what you don't express, and you tend to repress. If you take the repression, which a certain amount of repression is normal, but if you take that to an extreme, it gets depressed and you push it down. You push it down. Anger, when it's pushed down, becomes depression. But if you take depression and you bury it even more, you go from express to repress to depress to impress. And these emotions from buried freedom tear at the actual body that you have. It makes you sick, like a stomach ulcer, like any psychogenic illness, anything where the mind incorrectly used, with mind cracks all over the place, the mind begins to somaticize and express itself in the physical body. Kind of like the blindness of Isaac in the Bible. He is blind physically, but if you look at the narrative of the story, he doesn't see what's going on right in front of him. He is actually spiritually blind, and it has impressed itself onto his physical body. One must be very careful when one wants to express one's freedom, that one does it correctly. Correct, again, from the Latin, to co-govern. In other words, we have to express our freedoms in a way that works with other people so that we avoid the tendency to do evil, which is just to act in freedom for ourselves alone. But more than that, as we began to talk about in the last podcast, we also have to express our freedom properly. Proper from the Latin meaning one's own self, meaning how do you enhance your freedom to bring about a flowering of who you are as an individual, as a unique soul, not just cooperation with others correctly, but properly for one's own self, like the word, propriety, for one's own self, for the sacredness of your own individual self in relationship to others, but beyond the relationship of others, so that you have your uniqueness and your own creativity. This is not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to do. Of course, the first thing you need to do is maintain health, because without that, you're not going to have individuality. The correctness is really sped along by thinking twice for what is the most peaceful approach. Okay. The third, freedom, is something which is an art. It's not just a political policy. Oh, we must have freedom. Let's have freedom. Freedom's what we need. Let's have freedom. Freedom, yay, freedom, fray, yay, yay, yay. And everyone says, I'm entitled to my freedom. I'm entitled to my freedom. And everyone's entitled to their freedom. And freedom is absolute. And this is what creates this insanity, which is commonly called identity politics. Is that the freedom, as the person self assesses it, meaning I assess my own sense of my freedom, and that's the only standard for it. And my identity with myself and my freedom is the only standard for my freedom. Well, that's a self-assessment, but I'm already getting a Freudian slip and saying it's a self-obsessing. Okay? We do not have any proper God search, which expresses the individuality and the freedom of your sacred self without considering other things besides simply one's own desires. One's own desires. Now, any obsessive compulsive disorder around freedom, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm using that term obsessive compulsive because it's in the general parlance. So, forgive me, but, it's a specialty language. Obsession compulsion is a very delicate thing to get through, and everyone has it because we have fear. We have fear of letting our freedom out. Our freedom is so powerful, so enormous, so drawing upon the very spirit or force of life, which is the nature of God. And the more you go in your God search, the more you're going to realize it. But we're so afraid of it that we hold it back and then we hold it back, and we never get a chance to fully see its full capacity, which we'll talk about. 2 more value priorities down the road. We have to express our freedoms correctly and properly. And how do we do that? By learning the value priorities and learning what we're going to talk about down the road, which are relationship priorities, because these are the very simple 12 guidelines that can help us navigate freedom. Now, freedom is an amazing thing. We are in the United States of America. We are the country with the oldest living continuous democratic constitution in the world, and yet we are one of the youngest nations in the entire world. We are the oldest and the youngest in that sense. And freedom and how to work it out. We're all very mean to each other lately. I mean, really mean. I mean, blue mean, red mean. It's just mean. And the fact of the matter is, we got to give ourselves a break as human beings, and we got to give ourselves a break as a nation, because the fact is that freedom to give individuals freedom as a sacred right of governance, it's a relatively new experiment, slightly over 200 years old. So of course we're making mistakes. Of course we don't know how to integrate freedom into strict lines of government and law. Oh, we know how to be autocratic. It's really simple how to lay down a law and force people through fear to pay attention to it. But we don't know the delicacy of how to implement freedom. We don't know it. We're learning it. It's never existed before in the history of human beings. Never before. Just wrap your head around that. So if you're having difficulty in your relationships or in your own personal life on expressing your own self, your own freedom, take it a little easy and don't be so hard on yourself. You are not alone. You are not alone. Freedom is an incredible blessing. It must be expressed or you will be spiritually sick. It must be expressed in our country or the country is going to become spiritually sick. But it has to be expressed correctly and properly. So that means we need liberty. Now, sometimes freedom and liberty are confused. They're two different things. They're confused. They're considered the same thing when they're really two different things. Liberty is a statement that no group herd consciousness alone can interfere with your right to express your freedom. Your freedom is God-given. It is, in fact, the Spirit of God in you. It is unrestricted, unlimited, and unbounded, except by itself. And it is for no one to give you your freedom. You don't have to sit around and justify that you have your freedom. You have your freedom. You have it the way you inhale, the way you chew your food, the way your eyes and ears, God willing, work. You have it. You have it. Liberty, which is the right place of government, the right place for social norms, that's a sacred political right because if government does not know its correct place, which is the facilitation of freedom, to not stand in the way of the freedom which is your right, endowed by the Creator. Well, if government doesn't know the proper way to execute liberty, they will interfere with the natural law that is the foundation of freedom. Remember, America is not a Christian country. It is a Christian flavored country, for sure. It's a Christian flavored country. It's an Anglo flavored country, for sure. Those are very, very dominant influences and good. But we are a natural law nation. We come right out of natural law from the European philosophers. We're different than France, for example. They are very, very democratic. And in fact, they're kind of competitors because they awoke to freedom at the exact same time in history as we do. But we did not have the same lines of Catholic Church that anchored us first. We did not have the same lines of monarchy and that tradition in the same way we threw it off. The American experiment is unique. It's incomparable to other nations. It's extremely special. So liberty is a curtailing of government so that it does not interfere with who you are as a soul. As a soul. But that does not mean you throw off all government and throw off all relationships with other people in order to have your freedom. Yes, you can do that. Yes, there is value in it in certain artistic expressions that are radical. I'm thinking of Jackson Pollock, who just broke all the norms of realism completely, made perfect sense after World War II. No. Those extremisms have their place in certain artistic and philosophical expressions as part of the learning experience, better thought about and created about than acted out in lethal wars. But true freedom, because we live in a unity, true freedom, because our causal abilities to create and experience and sow and reap are linked intimately with everything all around us. And true freedom is born of the truth, the substantial truth of God's being, the fabric of existence. Well, you can't assert your freedom without some kind of built-in intuitive sense of responsibility. True freedom is not recklessness. That's a teenage view of freedom. Let me break through every control. Let me destroy my health. Let me create lack of peace for everyone else. Let me restrict the freedoms of everyone else so I can have a sense of my own freedom. That kind of recklessness to blow off control is teenage behavior, and you see it from adults all the time. You see it from, government officials, politicians, teachers, and everyone acts recklessly, and they call that freedom. It's not. True freedom, which is spiritualized, integrates with an intuitive sense of connectivity and of unity, which is part of the Godsearch experience. Freedom can always find a way of expressing itself in a way that is beautiful, artful, and spiritually correct, in a way that is proper, that affirms your own uniqueness as an individual, your own uniqueness as a self and a soul. It's a very, very, I don't know how to explain it. It's the challenge of your humanity. The challenge of your humanity is to be able to embrace your freedom in a way that doesn't tear the tissue of all life and doesn't tear at the tissue of other human beings, and allows everyone that same right. It's an immense challenge, an immense challenge. And we're all on a learning curve on that. We're all on a learning curve. So personally, you have to examine yourself in freedom. These days, it's coming up a lot in the area of alternative sexual orientations, whether it's gay or lesbian or transsexuals or transvesticism, or whether it's any kind of intergender experiences. The individual has clearly a right to express the uniqueness that they are. It's freedom. It's absolutely freedom. It's undeniable. It has never taken place where a society has ever been challenged by gender and sexual minorities in the same way. And we are on a learning curve. But at the same time, this new minority, which is surfacing, has to be integrated over time into the fabric and the culture of the society we live in. And we're all doing a terribly sloppy job of it because we don't have any kind of model from the past that can help us, and we don't know how to do it. So a lot of times the anger and the stuff that is surfacing when we violate people by applying old biblical norms to new situations, or when we have radical individualities that seem to disrespect all of the virtues and structures that helped build civilization, A lot of times, the lack of peace that emerges really is making the situation worse. We have to learn, no matter who you are, whether it is a racial issue, whether it is a sexual issue, whether it is an ethnic issue, whether it's a political issue, which is different, okay? Even if it's an extreme issue, such as where you're touting some kind of thing that it's obviously a dangerous evil, nonetheless, you are entitled to freedom. But all of these things must be done responsibly. You know, I oftentimes use a very distasteful analogy, I would say, like everyone is welcome. By the way, everyone is welcome on Godsearch. Everyone is welcome, even cannibals, provided that they bring their own lunch and it's sourced correctly. Okay? Because that would be a correct exercise of freedom. Good luck with that one. But there's openness is openness. The question is, how do we work together and how do we apply our individual freedom in a way that elevates the individual and respects the creativity of individuality, which is the great gift of the American spirit, in a way that works in tandem with other people and the world that we're in. This is the challenge of freedom if you're truly and authentically devoted to a God search. If you go onto the website, yourgodsearch.com, and you go into the publications page, there's a funny little book that I wrote. I think it could be better, honestly, but its content is very strong and it's helped a lot of people. It's called The Six Fix, Spiritual Health Care for a Stronger America. A lot of these things I put down in that book in a much more dense form. It might help you if it's hard to track this thing on audio. Freedom is the number one challenge of our political and psychological era. It is the hard one. And we're getting more and more challenged, and we are so frightened we're going back to autocratic rules. We're hearing rumors of monarchy surfacing again. There's a lot of value to monarchy. I wouldn't say no to it if it was a good, clean, correct monarchy. I have no problem with democracy as long as it's a good, clean, correct democracy. But there's a lot of rumors of seeking control and seeking top level management of everyone, including technological management of everyone with implants and all sorts of stuff, and everyone's getting very frightened. It's because freedom is challenging. It's challenging. Don't allow anyone to interfere with your freedom. Don't permit the herd, H-E-R-D, to control your freedom. Get yourself heard, H-E-A-R-D. Everyone needs to hear everyone and include in the mix that view of freedom that the other person has, because what you do to the other person will come right back to you if you're sowing and reaping in the Garden of Eden of life, which is where we are. So value your freedom and learn about the freedoms of other people and try to resist the fear that kind of automatically, in a reflex way, you want to shut the freedom down. Shut the freedom down because it's too scary to face. No, accept the spiritual challenge of individuality. Accept the spiritual challenge of a democracy. Okay? Accept it. Okay? It's part of the incredible gift that we're exploring, which is a nation devoted to individual freedom and liberty, where a government steps out of the way to allow you that experience under God without it dictating the terms of your own soul. So another way to say that is there ain't no God search without freedom. And at that point, I would like to just thank you for your freedom. Thank you for using some of your freedom and some of your precious time on life. We don't get more of it in this body. We're not going to go into reincarnation right now. But thank you for spending so much of your freedom, meaning your time, and listening to me. Right? I hope you have a great week. Tune in next week. It's every Wednesday, about 5:45 a.m. on Eastern Time. There's a new podcast. And remember, if you're alive, you're already on a God search. So uncover God, discover God, and recover God. If you've had some difficulty, believe me, there is a living experience of God that is all around you. It is truth, it is unity, and it is the magnificent power to create our fantasies and dreams and make them as real as reality permits them to be. It's an incredible experience. Get on board. Thank you very much. This is Michael Shevack. Thanks for coming for another podcast on Godsearch. Bye-bye.